So here's a question I get all the time. Mauricio, should I set up a living trust or should I just go with a will? And the answer to that question all comes down to one word: probate. How do I avoid probate? Now, probate is just a court process where a judge oversees the distributions of your asset. So normally when you do a will, you're going to put together a document that basically has all the instructions of how to distribute your assets, whether it's cash, whether it's cars, property, businesses, what have you. You've got all of these assets, and your wills are a set of instructions that an executor will make sure gets executed and delivered to the proper people. In probate, a judge needs to oversee that process and do a final approval before all of those assets can be distributed. Now, here's the problem with probate. It's a government agency that's overlooking and overseeing the execution of your will. So what does that usually mean? Well, it means it's going to take a long, long time, number one. So one of the biggest issues with probate is that it typically takes 12 to 18 months for a relatively simple probate procedure to go through the courts. So as soon as you pass away, your heirs are not going to get access to whatever cash you want to give them, the properties. It's going to go through this process, and it's going to take 12 to 18 months if it's simple. And if you have property in different states, you have a little bit more of a complicated estate plan, then that number can go much higher, and it can take up to a couple of years to get through the estate planning process. Now, if you've got properties in multiple states, you're going to have to open up a probate in every single one of those states. As you can imagine, it's just a really drawn-out process. And so that's one of the main reasons you want to avoid probate, is it just takes a long, long time and puts additional stress on your heirs because they're not going to get your assets as soon as you pass away. Because it takes so long, the second issue with probate is that it's expensive. You're paying, or your estate, your heirs out of your estate are going to be paying for all of the attorney fees or court-appointed attorney fees that are going to be working on your case, plus all the court fees. And so a lot of the assets get eaten up in attorney fees. And I don't know about you guys, but most people don't want to pay attorney fees if they don't have to. And so avoiding probate also avoids the expensive attorney fees. And the last reason you don't want to have probate is that it's not a private system. It's public. It's the courts. And so everybody and their mother is going to know what assets you have, what agreements you have, who gets what and where, and it becomes a public document. You guys have probably remember some of these famous celebrities that you would thought have had some kind of a will, or some kind of a living trust, like Robin Williams comes to mind, a really well-known comedian. He passes away, doesn't have a living trust, just has a will, and all of that information is available to the public, so you lose all sense of privacy. It takes forever to get the money, and it's expensive. That's why you generally want to avoid probate. So how do you avoid probate? Well, the way that most people do it is through what we call a living trust. So when you set up a living trust, a trust is a separate legal entity that's separate from yourself, that has the trustees that are kind of the equivalent of managers of an LLC. They're the trustees of the people that control the trust, and there are beneficiaries, which are going to be your heirs. And so this is something that is set up while you're alive. It does cost a little bit more money, a little bit more expensive than a will, but at least you're not leaving or burdening your heirs with the cost of dealing with the ramifications after you pass away. So what happens with a trust is while you're alive, you're going to be the trustee, or you and your spouse is going to be the trustee. But as soon as you pass on, you're going to leave instructions as who is going to be the successor trustees who are actually going to make sure that the assets that are located in the trust get distributed to the proper people. And then, of course, beneficiaries are typically going to be the people that you want to leave your assets to, whether it's your children, your spouses, your parents. Those are going to be the beneficiaries. So when you pass, when you die, there is no probate. So literally the day after you die, the trustee, the successor trustee that you've nominated, can actually go through your will and go through whatever's inside the trust and follow the instructions of the trust and distribute the assets to your heirs immediately. There's no delay. There's no waiting 18 months. There's no expensive attorneys. The trustee is basically going to distribute the assets pursuant to the instructions that you've left. Now, we're not going to go through the details of what can be inside of a trust in this particular video, but you can really be as creative as you want to be in terms of how you leave your assets to your heirs, whether that's going to be the actual property in kind, whether that's going to be cash, whether that's going to be all at once, whether you're going to piece it out, especially if you have children. Maybe you don't want to give all your assets to your children right away. You give some of them now, some of them when they get older. So there's all kinds of ways, creative ways, that you can draft your trust documents. But the important thing to understand is that when you set up a trust, you are avoiding probate and making the whole process for your heirs much simpler.